So many people are at a dearth in terms of understanding who Dr. King was. Many have never even heard his voice extensively and about some of the issues that he helped champion. And so there's a chasm that exists in terms of understanding the man King, his philosophy, and how he literally transformed the 20th century in ways that no person has.
Welcome back to the beginning of season 4 of The Global Fringe, the podcast elevating leading voices from the fringe, especially women and people of color. If you're new, we are stoked that you are here. Don't be afraid to go back and listen to previous episodes. There are some powerful warriors and allies in those episodes. If you've been around for a while, you're gonna love this season. We've got some big familiar names of those who are leading from the margins, but some others who are a little more stealth in how they are making an impact in this world. My name is April Diaz, and I am your host. I am the founder and lead warrior of Azer & Co., a company that exists to activate women to live and lead with wholeness and full partnership with men. This season, we are all about sharing the stories and practices that will lead us all towards wholeness in our body, soul, and spirit. If you find yourself on the fringe of culture, our hope is that this podcast will help you feel like you belong and that your voice is needed in this world. We're getting started this month, Black History Month, by sharing the life and leadership stories of some incredible Black leaders in our country. Folks who are doing racial reconciliation work in their own ways. You're going to want to learn from these leaders and share their work with others. We're so happy to be back this season. So without further ado, here is our first episode of season 4 featuring the Dr. Marcus Goodie Goodlow. It is season 4 of The Global Fringe, and we are getting started in February, Black History Month. And we are talking about all the things that will lead us towards wholeness in life and in leadership, and the things that we need to do as leaders and humans to increase our partnership between men and women. And I couldn't be more excited to have my friend Dr. Marcus Goodie Goodlow on the episode today. Goodie, you are only the second person to have a repeat appearance on the Global Fringe.
Well, hello there. That's pretty awesome. Who's the other person I shared this?
The first person that is honored with this secondary appearance is Irene Cho. And she was actually the first guest on the 3rd season. We talked about the Enneagram, and she rocked it. And so then you pinged me, and you're like, hey, let's have a conversation about Dr. Martin Luther King. And we're doing it instead of on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We are doing it during Black History Month. But if you, my friends, audience members, do not know Goodie, let me tell you about him. He is a pastor at heart. He is an author. He is a speaker. One of my things that I love about Goodie is that he is a Black man working with police departments and justice organizations all over the country to help bring understanding, awareness, education around what does it look like for us to have more justice in our systems. And Goodie and I have known each other for a very, very long time. We have been teaching pastors together at a local church, and that kind of rekindled our friendship a couple of years ago. And Goodie, I just think you are one of the best allies. I love you dearly. And you've got a doctorate in the study of the life and the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King. And so I could not think of anyone better to kind of kick off this whole Black History Month, the Global Fringe, season 4, than someone who knows about this man so deeply. I don't know if anybody is more qualified in the spheres that I run in. So welcome back to the show.
Oh man, it's under promise, therefore I can over deliver. Oh my gosh. When you that introduction, it's like Dr. King once said when his friend Ralph Abernathy was introducing him at an event, as he listened, he got up After hearing all the accolades, he responded by saying, after that introduction, I wondered, paraphrasing, just who indeed he was referring to. And so I'm honored to be in the company of someone like Irene Cho, who obviously is a trailblazer advocating for aspects related to women and youth, obviously across this country and our ministry. Thanks to you for this opportunity again.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great. It's a great opportunity to talk about the leadership, legacy, and life of Dr. King, and particularly how that sort of crosses over and intersects to aspects which you are championing
Yep.
here on the fringe and advocating for causes that for which women are leading and impacting our world, for that
Yep.
matter.
Yep. Well, Martin Luther King Jr. has captured my imagination increasingly over the years. Part of it is because I'm increasingly aware of the gaps and in the injustices between the white and black communities in our country, the systemic injustices, the history that is not in the history books. As a white woman, I didn't learn. I didn't know. I was incredibly ignorant about the disparity and the injustices. But then I married a brown man, and we adopted a couple of black children and had a mixed baby, biological baby. And so Martin Luther King's dream has literally captured my imagination. I see my children walking down the street holding hands with one another, and every time it brings me to tears of the visionary statement that he had of dreaming that one day little black boys and little black girls and little white boys, little black girls, or little white, they would hold hands with one another. And my family is doing that. But I imagine that to happen so much more deeply in our country, and particularly as people of faith, that there would be a different conversation that we would have and different actions that we would take to be people of racial reconciliation. But I want to start kind of back towards the beginning of MLK's public journey. You said the civil rights movement started in 1955.
Yes,
And
December.
what was the impetus of that?
The impetus was a woman by the name of Rosa Parks, who in 1955 of December was in a seat on a bus down in Montgomery. She was actually in and I'm using the historical term now, the colored section. She was actually lawfully seated where she was allowed to sit. And there was a white patron who came on board on that first day of December in 1955 who wanted to sit down and actually went to the colored section. And Rosa Parks was asked by a guy by the name of James Flake, who was the bus driver, demanded that Rosa Parks give up that seat, and she did not. She was arrested. Rosa Parks was an active member in the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which is the oldest civil rights organization on the planet.
Wow.
And word spread around the community, and people felt, you know what, we need to do something. And really, the Montgomery improvement, it started off, the Montgomery bus boycott started off as the Montgomery Improvement Association. That was the initial name. It simply started off as, hey, we want to have access to these seats. And that turned in from a request to a crusade, and lasted all of almost 400 plus days.
Wow.
Where people of color, can you imagine this? People of color walked, rode bikes, hitched rides with the very few African Americans that did own cars, but took no public transportation for the better part of a year and several months.
Yeah.
And literally almost broke the back of the public transportation system there in Montgomery.
Yeah.
And so that was the start of the civil rights movement. Dr. King was all of 27 years old.
Wow.
Had just moved into Montgomery, and there was a group of ministers who got together and was trying to decide what to do about this arrest of Miss Rosa Parks. There was an impromptu meeting that was called at a local Baptist church. King ran home and said, hey, told his wife Coretta, I've been asked to sort of spearhead this protest. King was the youngest of age of 27. He was the youngest of the ministers, newest in town, and many felt almost by default he was given this opportunity because of sort of the clean slate he had, if you will.
Yeah.
He arrived home, went to his knees, and prayed. Coretta gave him his blessing, gave her his blessing. He gets to the church, literally could not get in because of the massive amount of people that had gathered. He was taken aback
Wow.
by the hundreds of people who had gathered in the span of just a few hours. And there, that began the
Mm.
launch of what we now know as the civil rights movement.
I just have like chills listening to
Yeah.
you and
Oh, it was
imagining. And also, Goody, like 1955. I mean, we're talking about my parents' lifetime. This
sure.
started, you know,
Yeah.
and certainly my grandparents, and the amount of disparity that has existed since the formation of this union and continues into this new decade is just mind blowing to me. I have you seen those books by Brad Messler? I am Martin Luther King Jr. I am Rosa Parks.
Yeah, I've seen those. I
Children's
haven't read them,
books.
but yeah, I've seen those children's books. I was just recommending to someone the other day about John Lewis's children's book. I was thinking
Huh.
about the Honorable John Lewis, who is
Yeah.
now battling
Yeah.
stage four
Cancer.
cancer.
Pancreatic.
But John Lewis wrote an award-winning, New York Times best-selling, multiple award-winning book called March One, March Two, March Three. He teamed up with these unique artists. It's so imagine uh, heroic sketch type imagery, really user-friendly language for young people, and labeled March 1, March 2, March 3, with a series of discussions around these pivotal moments,
Wow.
marches on Washington, march at Edmund Pettus Bridge, different events that had happened in the course of his lifetime as he co-led along Dr. King's life leadership. And so anyway, March 1, March 2, March 3, but it reminded me of what you just spoke
Yeah.
of, books, those illustrative books that are user friendly towards young people. I think so many people within our kids' our age, we have kids that are just a few years apart, and even a generation just after them. So many
Mm-hmm.
people are at a dearth in terms of understanding who Dr. King was. Many have
Mm.
never even heard his voice
Yeah.
extensively
Yeah.
and about some of the issues that he helped champion. And so there's a chasm that exists in
Mm.
terms of understanding the man King, his philosophy, and how he literally transformed the 20th century in ways that no person has.
Yeah. We are gonna tag those books to the show notes
Sure.
so that people can get them. But I have read, you know, both the Rosa Parks and the MLK Jr. books to my kids multiple times, and I can't get through them without crying, without choking up. And my kids are still confused as to why they're getting it the older that they get. They're understanding it more. But to to learn our history that they're not being taught in school still is just feels like a really important move as a mom, as parents, you know, to make sure that our kids understand both where they have come from and how
Sure.
they can be an active participant in righting the wrongs of this world. So I'm wondering, like, again, if you can kind of take us back to the beginning of this movement, what were some of the core pieces or the values or the principles that guided Dr. King in this dream?
Dr. King was a person of faith. I think it's important we start there. Many people tend to reduce King to a civil rights leader, which he
Sure.
was.
Yeah.
Certainly he was that, an academic, which he was. Um, Graduated from high school at 16, went on to attend, of course, Morehouse College and got his graduate work, and then, of course, went to Boston for postgraduate work and get his PhD. But Dr. King, first and foremost, was a person of faith.
Yeah.
He aligned
Reverend
his
Doctor.
life, yeah, he aligned his life consistent with the scriptures. Several generations of which his father and grandfather were preachers. And
Mm.
so Dr. King was raised in a middle class family, raised in the admonition and fear and the understanding of who God is. And it was the influence of people like his grandfather and father, his father, of course, who was influenced by the 16th century forerunner Martin Luther.
Yeah.
So much so that King's initial name was Michael,
Huh.
and Dr. King's father, Martin King Sr., was so impacted, having attended a Baptist World Alliance conference, hearing the impact of Martin Luther, came back, changed his name, and changed his son name.
No way. I did
And
not know
so
that.
those who affectionately knew Martin King would at times refer to him
Huh.
by his original name, which was Michael.
Huh.
Billy Graham was one of those people, by the way, who would
Interesting.
sometimes call him that. But yeah, so he was a person of faith, and so any discussion about Dr. King's legacy must first begin with his relationship with God.
Yeah.
In the words of the ancients, how it speaks of Adam, the first man, how Adam, walked with God in the cool of the day.
Mm.
And that was the life of Dr. King. He walked with the prophets. He often relied upon them for guidance, for instruction, drawing parallels from the struggles of the people of Israel who were advocated for and who looked to the prophets to be those points of anchor points of
Yeah.
justice and equality, calling out wrong and sin from Amos to Ezekiel to Jeremiah to Isaiah. King identified and drew parallels from the struggles of the people of Israel as it speaks in the ancients to that of the struggle of what it was like to face down
Yeah.
policies that were unjust.
Yeah. I am so grateful that you started there because one of the angst that I have had as a white woman living in America in a minority family has been that a lot of folks talk about race and ethnicity as merely social or political movements and things that should stay out of our churches or things that should stay out of our relationships with one another.
Mm.
And the reality is that this is a Jesus movement, that anything that has to do with righting the wrongs of this world is a Jesus kingdom gospel kind of movement. And I mean, even political, like to say that it's political is diminishing the importance of that word because politics is a Latin word for our shared life together.
Mm-hmm.
And life
Mm-hmm.
together is how we've been created since the garden, you know? And so I just feel like there has been a divorce between the work that we're supposed to be doing as the people of God, as followers of Jesus, and what we're leaving up to a government. And so for Martin Luther King Jr. to be a man who wed back together the gospel with racial reconciliation, it's one of it's the great sin of our country. So can you give your take? Can you give your own perspective on how Dr. King's dream intersects the heart of God and the church?
Sure.
And kind of a secondary part is, do we still need the dream in 2020?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Um, you talked about that often of late practice or belief that somehow these issues of justice and equality and fairness are sort of limited in a box apart from faith, apart
Yeah.
from what happens on a Sunday, or we don't want to quote be political,
Yeah.
crossing those lines between aspects of what we believe about our God. But really, for Dr. King, they were one and the same. He talked about a religion that speaks about a heaven and a sweet by and by while ignoring the plight and
Mm,
conditions of our brothers and sisters to the left and to the right as a dry and dusty religion.
yeah.
It's dead on arrival.
Yep. Yep.
He talked about how, when he speaks about the parable of the Samaritan and the priest and the Levite who comes across the person who was wounded on that Jericho road, that road which was a winding road, that road that was known to have people fall victim and
Yeah.
they become prey to those looking to do them harm. He talks about how when the priest and the Levite come, they ask the question, if I stop to help this man who has been beaten and robbed, what will happen to me?
Yeah.
But the Samaritan comes along and reverses the question.
Yeah.
If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him?
Mm,
And there is the great eternal question that we must all struggle with in the context of our faith.
yeah.
And so it's not about being political. It's about seeking justice,
Yeah.
love and mercy, and walking humbly with our God. It's about loving our God, yes, whom we have not seen, but how can we say we love our God whom we have not seen, but yet have a disregard for our brothers
Yeah.
to our left and to our right?
Yeah.
And so when we see and hear the story of Jesus, whose parents
Mm-hmm.
fled as a result of harsh penalties and policies, and literally that was putting his very life at risk.
Yep.
The idea of separating a family from their place of birth, separating even of children because of being threatened by children, edicts and policies that separate children from their parents, or in some ways disenfranchise people
Yeah.
based upon the color of their skin or where they live.
Yep.
Can anything good come out of Nazareth? That very statement is consistent with what people's views were at the time.
Mm-hmm.
If you were from here, if
Mm.
you were from there, if you had a condition,
Yeah.
pre-existing conditions, pre-existing conditions, you were unclean,
Mm-hmm.
you were divorced, you were a woman,
Mm-hmm.
you had a cleft palate.
Yeah.
Who sinned? And so this idea of, in some way, some people choosing the conditions in which they were born, they must have done something wrong. People equated the conditions, physical or otherwise, with sin.
Yep.
You must have done something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at how we sometimes treat people today, people with pre-existing conditions, or people with physical or mental illnesses, or people who were born on the wrong side of the track. And so we see that sometimes it is just about opportunity.
Yeah.
And so if we stand in our pulpits on Sundays, in our synagogues on Fridays, and talk about a God, and we talk about, for those of us who are Christians, talk about a Jesus who is concerned about life after death, that is an incomplete gospel.
Yes. Yes.
The gospel we preach says that Jesus was concerned not only about life after death and the resurrection that is to come, he was concerned about life after birth.
Mm.
And so when we talk about where what they call these lack of uh, uh, zones that exist where adequate stores where people can go and buy
Yeah.
groceries, or when we look and study as academics the increased amount of handgun purchases,
Mm-hmm.
and where those handgun purchases are happening in different communities, and where violence happens, or lack of adequate health care based upon where a person lives, or lack of access to clinics and hospitals, and all of these things
Yep.
are interconnected.
Yep.
It's not religion. It is about having a relationship.
Mm.
It is about asking the question. You know, the first question ever asked by God to a human being, where
Where
are
are
you?
you? Mm-hmm.
These are questions that we must continue to ask as those who proclaim to be followers of Yahweh.
Yeah.
Where are you, my brother? Where are you, my sister?
Yeah.
Why are you not in this boardroom?
Yes.
Why are you not being made available for this opportunity in the same way that I am?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. King believed we should not be judged by the color of our skin, but indeed by the
Mm.
content of our character. And we see over and over again that color not only separates us, but for some of us, color has become a disenfranchisement.
Yeah.
It's become an Achilles heel.
Yeah.
It's become a place, or it becomes a point of setback. Anyway,
We just went to church.
I want your listeners to continue to listen.
Oh my gosh. I,
Don't go away.
no, I my mind keeps like circling back to the story of the Good Samaritan, and how every other person asked the question, if I stop, what will this do for me? And then the question you said was changed to, what if I don't stop, what will it do to him? I actually
Yeah.
think both questions are critical, because what happens if I don't stop to me is part of a dismantling of the image of God that has been placed within me as well.
That's right.
And so there is an aspect of like, yes, what does it do for him, but also what is it doing to me? And the separateness, the compartmentalization, particularly for white folks in America, particularly for white Christians in America, has been a severing, a wounding of the image that God has placed within us, because we cannot see our brothers and sisters of color in the ways that Jesus has seen them.
That's right. I love what King says. He says that the gospel at its best, the euangelion, Greek, is the word for the good news.
Mm-hmm.
The gospel at its best deals with a person not only in their soul, but in their body, not only in
Yep.
their spirit well being, but in their material well being. And so we lift up not just souls, but we lift up the conditions for which those souls dwell.
Yeah.
And so we have discussions of disproportionate arrests or shootings.
Yeah.
We have discussions and address issues of policy related to gerrymandering.
Yeah.
We have policies and we discuss issues related to matters concerning welfare and overall healthcare issues that can make uh,
Mm-hmm.
communities vibrant and thrive.
Yeah.
Gun violence.
Yep.
We talk
Maternal
about
health.
we talk about the right to life and this idea of having a right to bear arms seems to be uh, a miss.
Mm-hmm.
We hold on to and we cling to such things, having no regard for how such rights are literally imposing on the freedom of others.
Yeah. Yeah.
30,000 people a year by handgun violence.
Yeah. Which is why I respect so much the work that you do with local police agencies and with captains. Is that the name of who leads the department?
Well, Chiefs,
Chiefs. There we go. I knew it was a C word.
shout out to Chief Kaufman of Redondo Beach Police Department, Captains John Naylor and Joe Hoffman. So there will be the second in command. But not only those guys, people like Joe Luna, Chief Robert Luna of Long Beach Police Department, who is a member of the church you and I were part of for a number
Mm-hmm.
of years as teaching pastors. But these women and men across
Yeah.
the country who help lead some of these departments, I've gotten a chance to work with. I've gotten a chance to speak 3 years now at the Chiefs of Police Association meeting here in California, where over 60 chiefs actually 75 chiefs have
Jeez.
gathered, including LA's PD's chiefs and Long Beach and San Diego and others.
Yeah.
From that, I've worked now with at least half a dozen departments, ranging from Long Beach to Southgate to Hermosa to Redondo Beach as well in Long Beach. So it's been a tremendous blessing. You know, I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, a place called Compton.
Yeah.
And shout out to the what is it? Oh man, I can keep it with all the zip codes now. 562 to 310 to 323. But Compton, for all the wrong reasons, sometimes it's known by. Some of those struggles growing up, though, was not only with ourselves
Yeah.
fighting for property we didn't own, for colors we didn't create,
Mm-hmm.
but also our struggles within, as brown and black people within the community, struggling against law enforcement and some of the uh, unjust policies and treatments
Yeah.
that were enacted. You know, it's ironic here. We are nearly 60 years after King's death, that when you look at some of those images projected on the screen of police dogs and police officers, even firefighters, hosing down people of color and
Yeah.
holding them back, beating them, and these confrontations taking places on the streets of places like Birmingham, Alabama, and Atlanta, Chicago, different places. You have to wonder, that in a lot of instances, it was people who were given broad and great authority by our government
Yeah.
to enforce those
Yep.
unjust laws.
Yep.
And so the beauty of my work today is looking to my left and to my right and working with women and men who are given incredible
Yes.
power and authority from our
Yes.
government, our
Yep.
state, and even our federal government,
Yep.
who are now working not to enforce unjust laws, but to enforce laws that keep our communities
Yeah.
safe. And you know what? They don't all get it right.
Mm.
I tell people police officers uh, are no different from a dentist or from a lawyer, from a manager of a restaurant in this sense. Yes, they put their lives on the line at
Mm-hmm.
any given time, and that makes them unique. But it does not absolve them. It does not in some way give them permission to do bad things.
Yeah.
They're not infallible.
No.
And so we dare not go to a bad tax collector or bad dentist or
Mm-hmm.
bad accountant or a restaurant where the
Mm-hmm.
food is terrible. We would never tolerate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So because you wear a gun and a badge does not assuage or absolve you
Yeah.
from being held accountable.
Yeah.
You should be celebrated. You should be cheered on. You should be encouraged. We should support our law enforcement officers. But yet, when they do wrong, we should hold them accountable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've heard a lot of my white friends, especially in the last few years, as the climate has changed in our country, or rather maybe has been revealed in our country around racial disparity, racism, white supremacy, white nationalism, etc. That when they look back on the civil rights movement and Dr. Martin Luther King's involvement, that they cheer him on and they approve of his message. They would be advocates if that had happened today. And yet I feel like this is the time. There are moments today now where we have an opportunity to be an ally, to be a reconciler, to be an advocate. And then I see some of the same white folks that are silent and that will not speak against or out. And it's so disheartening. And I know Dr. King was incredibly disheartened with white Christian moderates, said so in the letter from the jail.
Birmingham jail.
That letter is so powerful and so convicting, I think, for not just 60 plus years ago, but also for today, 2020. And so I'm wondering, in just the couple of minutes that we've got left before you go pick up your son from school, what does it look like? Give us 2 or 3 specific ways for white people to be an ally, to be a reconciler, and to be an advocate for racial justice and for people of color.
Dr. King, in that letter from Birmingham jail, which was, by the way, written on pieces of newspaper,
Yep.
smuggled in by his attorney in April 16th of 1963, said in that letter, which was written to 8 white clergymen.
Yep.
It is the closest thing we have in modern times to an epistle written by a prophet. And it should be required reading for every person who calls themselves a follower of the teachings of Jesus. But in that letter, there are several movements, several tones, and I extract a few of them to answer your question. 1, he says in that letter, there can be no great disappointment where there is no great love. He talked about being disappointed in these white clergymen who basically, many of them condemned him for coming in and being an outsider.
Yeah.
So one
It's good.
One of the things our white brothers and sisters can do, those who are in the faith, is love. And then we know that love is not a noun, it's a verb. Love is not passive, it's active. It's long suffering. It's not easily provoked, right?
It's also not at a distance, right?
It's not at a distance.
Friendship.
That's right.
It's relationship. It is up close.
So one, love. And the fullest expression of such, not phileo, the brotherly love, but even agape love.
Mm-hmm.
So love people who don't look like you, love people who don't vote like you, love people who don't have the same music in your worship
Mm-hmm.
context like you. Love. The second step I think our brothers and sisters could do is um, is be advocates.
How?
Many of us are not in positions of influence. Speaking specifically as Christians, followers of the teachings of Jesus, from Christian universities, institutions, from presidents to deans, from businesses to boardrooms,
Mm-hmm.
where people of faith are have influence. Look to your left and to your right and say who's in the room and who's not
Yep.
by gender and both ethnicity. In most of those instances, people of color, specifically black and brown people, are not in those rooms.
Yep.
If you are a white woman or a white man, and you're putting together a conference, you're putting together your speakers list, what bands you're bringing in, what speakers you're bringing in, what literature are you putting together in your syllabus. As you know, I'm an adjunct
Yes.
professor, so you're putting together your reading list
Uh-huh.
for your students. You're a professor, you're a dean, you're the president of a college. You're putting together your presentation. Who's on the syllabus? What diverse group of scholars do we have? So one, love. Two, advocate. Who can I become the biggest cheerleader of?
Yeah.
I remember I was in a meeting with an organization that was planning a big event out here on the West Coast, and I won't give the name, but you know it because you've been a part of it. They were having it down in Orange County, and they have a version of this on the East Coast. They decided to bring a version of this to the West Coast, and I was invited to this church where they were having this big strategic meeting, this huge conference. Everything from the menu to the speakers to the music,
Yep.
I weighed in on. Well, they only heard me on one thing, which was the music. And do you know, for the span of 5, 6, 7 years, the person who I brought up, whom they had not even considered musically, not only came, but wrecked it every year.
Yep.
And now, I'm not saying that for edification for me. What I'm saying is, it wasn't that their heart was in the wrong place, this group of women and men who were leading this conference. They had not even considered
Yeah. It's blindness.
bringing this person in to do music. And then when this person came, it was like amazing.
Yeah. Yep.
So you can advocate, you can love, show this great love being not just a noun, but a verb. And then lastly, I would say, Dr. King says, we fear each other because we don't know each other. We
Mm.
don't know each other because we don't spend time with each other. Hey, man, just live life.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
for you, I mean, you're all in, April Diaz. You're all
I
in. I
am.
mean, you're literally all in. That's impressive.
All day.
I mean, from those of your listeners who don't know, I mean, obviously, I'm married into the dominant culture. I mean, you've adopted into the
I'm
minority
doing the
culture.
reverse swim.
You're
Yeah.
doing that's impressive.
No.
You got somebody else's kids, but they're your children, and you are to be applauded for that. That's amazing. But what I say is spend time with each other. For example, I was able to participate in an event here in Redondo Beach in honor of Dr. King in partnership with our police department, where we championed, celebrated his life. In addition to, we made a tangible gift to the city in the form of a memorial. You know what it was, April? We dedicated and unveiled a bench,
Huh.
a bench
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that has a plaque with Dr. King's image and the quote that says, again, we fear each other because we don't know each other. We don't know each other because we don't spend time with each other. And the whole idea of the bench is to just sit
Mm.
and reflect and dwell with someone differently than you and me.
Mm,
And so I would say do that. Those are three things you can
so
do
good.
immediately. If you're a person of influence, particularly if you're white, white male, white female, a person of faith, and you say, you know what, I want to do something, you have influence.
Yeah.
You write checks, you create budgets, you're formulating the conference, you're putting together the speakers list, you're putting
Hmm.
together that syllabus.
Yeah.
You have the capacity to influence. I would say use your influence for good.
Hmm.
To have it, thy kingdom come, God's will being done, not only in heaven, but here
On
on earth.
earth. Well, in the words of the superhero Spider Man, where there is great privilege, there is great responsibility.
Responsibility, there it is.
And that is our responses to what we are able to do are everything. So
That's
I
right.
thank you for bringing it. I learn from you every time we have a conversation in any context, live on Marco Polo, on a
That's right.
podcast,
You be
hanging
trolling me,
out.
man.
No way. You love it. Okay, so we got to wrap this up real quick
Okay,
because you got
all
to
right.
get your son from school. Muy importante. You're a good partner at home too, Goodie. But
Thank you
three
so much.
questions I'm going to ask every single guest this season.
Sure.
And these were really do tie into our mission at Azer & Co. to activate women to live and lead with wholeness and full partnership with men. And so I want to get just a soundbite from you on each of these questions. You ready?
Okay.
Number one, what does it look like for a woman to be activated towards wholeness in life and leadership? What does she do?
Be fully human. Be fully human. Fully human. You know, we're created in the imago Dei, in the image of God. And when God created us, in the whole creation story, the only thing God said that wasn't good was when we were alone.
Yep.
And so, what I would say to that question is be fully human. And part of being fully human is being connected,
Mm-hmm.
looking to your left and to your right, and realizing the value in journeying with others. That's being fully human.
That's good. Second question, what's the number one practice that leads you towards wholeness?
Oh, hanging out with Jesus de Christos, examining his words, studying his life, listening to the spirit, that same spirit that lived in him.
Mm,
Yeah, that is it for me. I mean, I wish I could come up with something more creative or profound, but it really is that. It's not cliches for me.
yeah,
If I am not connected to Jesus,
yeah,
his light, love, and his leading, I am void of purpose.
yeah.
I have no direction, and I am tossed to and from
Mm,
by every condition and circumstance that comes my way.
it's
I
good.
want to be a follower of Jesus. I want to immerse my life in the teachings of Jesus, walking with him in the cool of the day.
Mm, beautiful. Last question. How can men use their privilege to partner better together with women?
Listen, listen. It goes back to that first. Dr. King said, the time is always right to do right.
Mm, yep.
And so I would say, as a man, listen for those opportunities, seek out those opportunities to do right by women.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised by a single parent mother, Mary Wagner, who's still living today. She was the first model I had as a parent, as a prophet. My mom's an evangelist, preacher, teacher, a provider,
Mm,
an advocate, a champion. My mom was all those things. And so when I look at my mom's life and what the impact she's had on me and raising my two sisters, my one sister who's no longer with us now,
mm-hmm.
I think about that. I think about where my life would be without her.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful, and
Yeah.
listening to her and how she provided and advocated for us. And women, listen, Women don't need permission from men to lead.
Yeah.
They don't need permission or affirmation from men to lead. But you know what? It sure doesn't hurt
No.
for men to champion, to encourage, to celebrate
Yeah.
in tangible ways. You're not going to get a bigger affirmation from God who created you in his image. This is to all your women listeners,
Yeah.
leaders. But you know what? As men, we can do better.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing, it was indeed through a woman that God gave us his son.
Mm-hmm.
It was indeed women who were last at the cross, first at the empty tomb. Many of those women helped raise up early churches there in the New Testament. We see they advocated for this good news, for this gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Even so many women in my years in the church, men were absent in a lot of the churches I was a part of. And it was the women who were going down on Skid Row here in Los Angeles and advocating, going to the local prisons and having the car washes and the fundraisers to raise money for building projects. And it was the women who were providing basic and both spiritual needs to many in our community. And so how dare I, as a man, based on some distorted view of the scriptures, limit or speak to? Who am I to say whom God has not called or called? Who am I to say whom God has positioned or given an opportunity? The gifts he's given me, who am I to say that those same gifts are not for you?
Yeah. Well, thank you. You have always been someone who has done right by me. And I am so grateful for your friendship. And you were, just brilliant today. So thank you so much for being an advocate for women. Thank you for being someone who shows up in wholeness and is leading others towards that as well. I just respect the hell out of you. And I'm grateful for you. You're my brother. So
thank you so much, April Diaz, and to all your listeners. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's an honor to be with you. And let's continue in 2020.
Together.
Onward.
Together. All right. Hey, real quick, where do people find you on social media? We'll add this to show notes.
GoodieGoodlow.com. Goodie Goodlow. Goodie Goodlow is all my social media handles.
Okay.
Goodie is Goodie. Goodlow, GOODLOE. Goodie Goodlow. And of course, GoodieGoodlow.com. You can find out where I'm headed next.
Yes.
And what's happening. And of course, all my social media handles are my name.
All right. We will tag it all on the show notes. And until next time, onward.
Onward.
Thanks for listening today, friends. You can listen to previous episodes on our website, azerandco.com/podcast. If you're finding value, please become a patron with the link in the show notes. It costs real dollars and loads of time to produce this podcast, and your dollars make it possible for us to keep doing this work. If you're not already, take a second to subscribe so you won't miss a thing. It also means a ton when you tap your screen to rate, review, and share this podcast with others. All of that allows us to continue sharing voices from the fringe for the betterment of our world. Peace.
Hey friends, do you love podcasts like the one you just listened to? Have you ever dreamed about having your own? Well, my name is Michael and I work for Truthwork Media. We believe that everyone has a story and every story deserves a podcast. Let us help you get started. Look us up at www.truthworkmedia.com, fill out our questionnaire, and I'll schedule a time to talk. It's really that easy. Truthwork Media. Everyone has a story. Yours needs a podcast.